guys, welcome back to another video. Today's video is a bit of a wild one because I've recently decided that it is time to unhaul a lot of books. My shelves were running out of space, like they were literally overflowing with books stacked on top of books, and it was just so chaotic. It was overdue. So I have 66 books that I am unhauling, and in today's video, I'm going to be sharing reasons for why I'm unhauling them with you. I'm not going to go over all 66 because that would take forever. And also, if any of these books pique your interest, I have a Pango Books where I'm going to be selling them for really cheap. I just honestly just want them gone. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, I've kind of grouped them by genre. So I'm trying to decide which genre I want to go over first. So first, I'll be going over the general fiction books I'm getting rid of. First up, we have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, which is an insanely popular book. I've read it, I liked it, I listened to the audiobook, and then Book of the Month was giving away copies, I want to say for free for certain members when this was the Book of the Month, Book of the Year. I liked it a lot. It wasn't a favorite book of mine. There's one chapter in particular that I thought was just phenomenal of this book, but I'm not going to reread this. I'm not going to reread it physically, so I figured it's time for someone else to have it. Next up, I am also unhauling The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I read this while I was an undergrad, which was 4 years ago. I didn't really like it. I'm not a lit fic girly, and this is super lit fic. I was really drawn in by the premise of it being this kind of art heist, this sprawling drama following our main character as he comes into possession of some stolen artwork in his life. And I wish that there was more of this like heistiness of it, or of the illicitness of having stolen artwork. It took me so long to read. I had no idea. This was like, yeah, I'm seeing it's over 700 pages, and I just remember not really loving it, but I know so many people love it, and so I hope someone will pick this up and love it too. Next up, I have, I think this is from high school. I have Since Then, which is Paper Towns by John Green. This was my favorite John Green book when I was a high schooler, probably because I was too pretentious to be the Fault in Our Stars girl. So I had to like this one instead. I really liked it. It's just, I'm not going to reread it, so out it goes. Next up is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I read this for my book club. This was our very first book club pick in January of last year. I really liked it. I think I gave it like 3 stars. Some things didn't work super well for me. I did love Marcellus, our octopus narrator. I think this one is really sweet. It's a very lighthearted read. If you're looking for something easy to read, I would recommend this. It's very unique, but I think it's time to give it a new home. Another kind of random one that I'm getting rid of is Little Bee by Chris Cleave. I read this one probably like 7 or 8 years ago. It's like so hard to remember what it was about, honestly, but I remember really liking it. I lent it to friends to read after I read it. It's good, but it's not something I'm going to reread, and it's not worth taking up the shelf space. The next genre, let's see. I'm getting rid of only 3 books that I would call fantasy books, so I'll go over those next. First up is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I didn't read this one. This was a book that my husband got. I really loved N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy. I thought it was phenomenal. This one didn't really grab my attention. The premise, I believe, is about these cities that kind of gain sentience and their powerfulness. It feels kind of like Neil Gaiman, sort of like, if we believe in them, they become more powerful thing, but with cities. I don't know, that could be entirely wrong, but I know a lot of people love this series. A lot of people love these books. I love N.K. Jemisin. I just don't think I'm ever going to read this. Next, I'm pretty sure this is fantasy. I don't know what else. I didn't know what other pile to put it in. But I have The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. We all know Handmaid's Tale, which is fantasy. And I remember getting this at the thrift store, like when it first came out, and I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I was so excited to find this at a thrift store. But it's been sitting on my shelf for probably 7 or 8 years. Literally moved to a different state, took this with me. I'm not going to read it. I liked Handmaid's Tale. I didn't love it. And if I'm being honest with myself, I don't see myself physically reading this. Last in the fantasy stack of books that I'm getting rid of, this is another one of my husband's books that I figured I would just talk about as well. It's Kingdom of Liars by Nick Martell. He did not like this one. I don't know anything about it, but maybe steer clear. I trust his opinion. All right, next up on the docket, let's talk about the romance books that I'm getting rid of. So a few years ago, I was definitely more into reading romance than I am now. I am not really in my romance era, but I was, and I appreciate her for what she was. And so I have some books that I've read in that time that I will now be getting rid of. First up is One Day in December by Josie Silver. I read this one, I remember I read it in like the spring, and I was like, that was a December book, I should have saved that for the winter. I couldn't tell you a single thing about the plot. I don't remember it. I remember liking it. I think I gave it like 3 stars. I'm not going to reread it. I don't have any reason to recommend it to someone and be like, here you go, please borrow this and read this. So it's not worth keeping around. All right, next up, oh my gosh. Okay, this is a really popular one. I feel like I might get some heat for this, but I tried to read this romance when it first came out, and it just wasn't my thing, and that is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I read the first like 20-30 pages. Oh my gosh, the dust jacket is on upside down. I remember reading the first like 20-30 pages, and I'm a horrific DNFer. Like if I'm not feeling it, I'm just not gonna read it. And this one, it gave me the ick. So it wasn't for me, but I know so many people love Ali Hazelwood, so I know this one's gonna go to a good home. Next up is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. Again, this was another one that I read while in undergrad. I remember really liking this. I remember this was one of the first like romance books that I read, and I was shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, at the spice. I'm more of a closed door girl, and this is not a closed door book. I'm pretty sure that this is the first in a series, and I don't see myself reading this series, rereading this book. Next up, I have You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogel. This one I remember being so excited to read because it sounded like such a funny premise of it's this engaged couple and neither of them really wants to go through with the marriage and the engagement, so they're trying to prank the other person to such a degree that they call off their engagement. And like that sounds really funny, but it kind of bummed me out. It kind of made me sad. Like, just talk about how you feel, people. I do know some of my friends do love this book, so I'm hoping that this will also fall into the hands of someone who will appreciate this one. So the next book that is getting unhauled was recommended to me by a friend who, on Goodreads, I think she gave it like 5 stars. She worked in the wedding planning industry, and that is The Secret Bridesmaid by Katie Birchall. I remember really enjoying this one. It focuses less on the romantic relationship between our female and male main characters, but it focuses a lot on the female friendships and platonic female love, which I really enjoyed. The premise of this one was also super fun. It follows our main character who is a professional bridesmaid, who she basically is like a wedding planner for people who don't want to admit that they need a wedding planner. And she has to win over the bride and also is falling in love with her brother. I remember very vividly they talk about drinking a kiwi lime smoothie, and I went through a kiwi lime smoothie phase after reading this book. The final romance book that I am unhauling is The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. I read this one, I made some friends read this one for a little informal book club. I remember being like, oh, this is very cute. It had some very fun fantasy-like world building in the witchiness of this world. It was cute. I think my socks stayed on. They were not knocked off by it. But I know a lot of people love it, so maybe someone will pick it up to read in the fall. The next genre of books that I have that I am unhauling is true crime. So, about 5-ish years ago, I went through a huge true crime phase. Like, I was all about the podcasts and the documentaries, everything, the books, like everything. And I can appreciate that time in my life that it was. And also, like, now I'm not super into that. True crime kind of bums me out. So I hope that some of these true crime books can go to people who will appreciate them. So the first true crime book that I have in this stack is Furious Hours by Casey Sepp. And when I got this book, I was obsessed with Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird. So I was super excited about this one. I was not very entertained by it. It felt very long. Not my favorite. I DNF'd this book at like 80%. Not that the book was bad, it just did not keep my interest. So the next true crime book that I am unhauling is about a case that I remember listening to an episode of like My Favorite Murder about, and I was just fascinated and I needed to know more. So I got The Yoga Store Murder by Dan Morse. It's all about a case where one Lululemon employee murders another Lululemon employee and tried to cover up, and it is wild. Next, I have Chase Darkness with Me by Billy Jensen. I went to a book signing event for this, and this book is actually signed by Billy Jensen. Here. It says, "To Amanda, keep digging," from Billy Jensen. His event was very cool to listen to. But I don't see myself reading this. I didn't even read it. I bought it, didn't read it. I'm not going to read it now, so time to unhaul. The next book that it's time to part ways with is Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered by Karen Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstark. I was so into My Favorite Murder. It was like my favorite podcast, my very, very favorite thing. I followed it religiously and I loved this book. I really appreciate both of these women. I'm not going to reread it, so time to unhaul. Next up, I'm unhauling one of the books by who I call the queen of the true crime book genre. I've read a lot of her books. I love them. This is Anne Rule. This is Green River Running Red. I really enjoyed, of course, The Stranger Beside Me and, Small Sacrifices. I don't foresee myself reading this because this, just looking at the back, it says, "Some of the victims of the Green River Killer." That sounds so sad. I'm not gonna read this. Okay, the last stack that I have next to me is my thriller stack. So I used to read almost exclusively thrillers and mysteries, and I just don't really gravitate towards them that much anymore. Like, if it's an author that I know that I like, I'll read it. If there's a unique premise, I'll read it, but it's just not really my thing anymore. So I have a very tall stack of thrillers to unhaul. On top is The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. I know this is going to sound bad because I'm going to be listing this on my Pango Books. I did not like this book. I don't have any reason to recommend it. If you're looking for a thriller, don't read this one. But if you know someone who wants to buy it, it's on my Pango Books. Next, oh gosh, I want to like this author so bad, you guys. I want to like him so bad. He is like a cult classic, infamous book content creation space author that everyone loves. I just don't vibe with him, and I'm sorry. And that is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I've read The Silent Patient twice because I want to see, like, the first time I read it, I didn't like it. And then I reread it to see if I would like it again a couple years later. Like, maybe my opinion had changed, and it didn't. And then so I was like, okay, well, maybe The Maidens will, like, teach me what people like about Alex Michaelides, and it didn't. So this book is pretty short, and it took me like a month and a half to read. So it just was not it for me. Next up that I am unhauling is The Hunting Wives by May Cobb. I remember really liking this one. Like, my favorite sort of thriller book is a very domestic suburban thriller. And this follows a whole group of moms and the drama in their neighborhood, which I just love. Like, who's keeping what secret from who? This weird social dynamic that suburban moms have and their drama that feels very small scale in the grand scheme of things, but to them means everything. I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it like 3.5, 4 stars. Oh, and I left my bookmark in here too, so if you buy it, you can get a bookmark. Next up are a couple of books. So I used to live in Australia for a little while, and when I lived in Australia, I was really in my thriller phase, and so these books have traveled continents. And I'm finally embracing the fact that I'm just not going to read them. So it's time to part ways. I couldn't tell you a single thing about them. We have In Too Deep by Samantha Hayes and Salvation of a Saint by Kigo Hagashino. I don't know anything about them. I bought them at the same time. I'm not going to read them. So if you want a book from Australia, mate, get one of those. This is another random thriller. I don't know anything about it. It's called Under the Harrow by Flynn Barry. I remember reading the back of this and being like, ooh, that sounds really good. But it's just, it doesn't sound like something that I'm going to want to read anytime soon. And if I later decide like that I would want to read it, I could probably just get it from the library. Next up, I have 2 books by the same author. One of them I liked much more than the other. First up is The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley and The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. So I'll talk about this one first. I really, really liked this one. I love a very locked down location for a thriller and the very claustrophobic feel. And this one had it. They're all snowed in. They're getting killed off. It's very Agatha Christie. I really liked it. Oh, but... oh my gosh, there's a plane ticket in here. We've got Denver to Las Vegas. Random connecting flight ticket in here. Next Lucy Foley, yes, I said, was The Paris Apartment. I wanted to like this one so bad. I don't remember why I didn't like it, but I just did not like it. Something about the mystery was not well fleshed out, well paced. It would just felt boring to me, but I know a lot of people who loved it, so hopefully this can go to someone who will love it more than I did. Next thriller up is The Girls' Weekend by Jody Gurman. I remember this was one of the first books that I bought because of BookTube. My husband was watching a BookTuber talking about some like summer reads books, and this one sounded so good. It's like another very suburban style mom drama, as I like to call them. And it's like the girls are on a girls' weekend. I'm pretty sure someone dies and it's a whodunit. What's the mystery? This was good. I was underwhelmed because the booktuber, I don't remember who it was, but I remember she was like 5 stars. Oh my gosh. So I had really high expectations and they were not met. It was good. This one is one of my least favorite books by an author that I do really like. I do really appreciate this author. I know a lot of you guys love this book. It was not for me. It is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. Again, this was another really short book that took me over a month to read. I think I read this, and then I read The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, and I was just like, what is going on? Daisy Darker was just underwhelming. It takes place in a house on an island that is only accessible when the tides are low, and the tide is high and people start dying, and then they're like, what is going on? We can't get off this island. The atmosphere was really cool. There's a big twist that happens at the end that was so painfully obvious to me the whole time. So when it was revealed, I was so underwhelmed. I do really like Alice Feeney. I love Rock, Paper, Scissors by her as one of the best thrillers that I've ever read. So I was super excited for this one, but yeah, time to unhaul. Next up, a book that I'm unhauling is This Delicious Death by Kayla Cottingham. I wanted to like this one so bad. So this one follows girls who are going to a music festival, but they have this disease where they have to eat human flesh. I tried to read this physically. I couldn't get into the prose and the writing style of it. I tried listening to the audiobook and I still just couldn't get into it. Oh gosh. Okay. Next up is another book that I read for my book club. This, in my opinion, is my least favorite book that I read in my book club. What Lies in the Woods. I did not like it at all. It was one, like, at the end, I just kind of skimmed to get through it. I wanted more building out of the games that took place in the flashbacks, because it follows a group of girls growing up, and in this forest they'd play the Goddess game. And the book doesn't really talk about what that game was or what it entailed. The only thing that we know is that they found a dead body and somehow incorporated her into their game. It just felt like half-baked, not my favorite book that I've read. Alright, the last book that I will be talking about that I am unhauling is a book that I really, really, really love, and that is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. I remember reading this so vividly while working at the summer camp. I was working on like a high ropes course, and I was on a platform in a tree, and I just had to wait until the kids made it up to me. So I put this small little book in my backpack and I read it while working at the summer camp. I love this book. This book made me really appreciate Swedish mystery writing and thriller writing. I didn't keep reading this series, but now I think I ought to. But I am unhauling this book, even though I loved it, and I have very fond memories with this specific book. I'm unhauling it because we actually have a second copy. So this one is going to go hopefully to a loving home who will appreciate the lore that this book has had. So that is it. Alright guys, there you have it. Those are some of the 66 books that I've decided to unhaul. Again, all of these books and more are going to be on my Pango Books. I will include the link below for you to check out. Hopefully some of my positive reviews have encouraged you to pick some up. And maybe a book that I didn't love, you will love more than I did. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye.